There's a thin line between discipleship and insanity. April 10th, 1990. 10 years after the Plowshare 8 had gone into a federal nuclear stockpile, basically what it was, and damaged the nuclear warheads, threw blood on files and paperwork and documents. On April 10th, 1990, in Norristown, not far from here, they stood before with the defense that they were following the scriptural mandate to turn swords into plowshares. They were following what the Bible told them, or so they said. Is that insanity? Or is that discipleship? More recently, we've had thousands of people occupy Wall Street, living in tents at various places around the country to bring out the disparity between the wealthy and the poor. Is what they were doing insanity? Or is it discipleship that we should be taking care of the poor? Now, regardless as to how you feel about these situations, these are facts. This is what they were doing. And I know we've often fall on different sides of the table. But Jesus kind of does the same thing, and the Jews look at him and say, is this insanity? Or is it discipleship? He walks into the church, the temple, and he turns over the tables. He makes a whip and chases out the animals. John puts us at the beginning of his gospel. There's no question as to whether or not Jesus did this. It's actually in all four of the Gospels. But everybody else puts it at the end. Almost as the catalyst that takes us into Passion Week, into Holy Week. The catalyst that brings Jesus to the cross. John puts it at the beginning. But if you listen to the story, it probably takes place at the end of his ministry. This isn't something people normally do when they're starting something new. Let's see how many enemies we can create as we get going. But he brings this out as a point that our ministry, John brings us out as a point that our ministry is extremely important and should not be taken lightly. Heads to the cross. Before Jesus heads to the cross, he goes into the temple to reclaim it. He chases out those who were selling animals, those who were making change, who in reality had probably made a living right outside of those doors, because it was the time of Passover. And people traveled to the temple to make their sacrifices, to offer their sacrifices to God. And rather than bringing their livestock with them, those who had money often bought it before they came and asked for forgiveness. What Jesus does here is he takes and moves us from Old Testament to New Testament. He takes us from the old law to the new grace. don't see in our translation is temple has two words. At the beginning, temple, the building, all around us. Not just the sanctuary, but the temple was a multiple layered church where people would gather on the outside. Only the priests were allowed into the Holy of Holies. But when Jesus says, destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days, he uses the word naos, which is sanctuary, the holiest of holies. Jesus does not say that he will rebuild the building in 3 days. But he will rebuild where God truly lives. The Holy of Holies, the innermost place. His being the temple. For 30-some years, Jesus walked as a man, walked and taught. He preached. And as we approach the cross, he brings us to the fact where we realize that the temple is more than just the building around us. Destroy Christ. Destroy the body. And God will come back to live in our hearts, to live in him, to live through him. So how do we rebuild years of work? How do we rebuild years of work? I think we're always rebuilding. For some of us, years of work don't take as long. We see our kids sharing questions and stories. And we see God rebuilding them at young ages. We see people who are our age, who all of a sudden find the true temple, find Jesus, and rebuild their lives so that Jesus lives through them, Jesus lives in them. Men and women who are on death row, who have nothing but time to sit and read and pray, often get the opportunity to rebuild their lives. It is incredible the number of people who go to execution, who go in peace. Because in the years of sitting there waiting for this moment, they realize that they have been wrong, that they have wronged others, and have turned to Christ for forgiveness. In a recent study, 78, I think the number is 78% of the people in a community look favorably on having a church nearby. They look favorably that it's a positive thing for their community to have a church nearby, because there's safety there. There's love there. The teachings are good for the children and for the community. And whether they attend or not, they believe it's a good thing. But the statistics also showed that something like 55% of that 78 are 60 years or older. What's missing in that confidence are our young people, our young families. It's in single digits of people who are between the ages of 18 to 27 who find that the church is actually a good thing for their community. And the number is even less when you look at men. So what is it in the church that we're missing? What is it that's causing us to not be able to rebuild the temple so that Christ can be seen in our communities? We're comfortable because we grew up in the church. We grew up knowing what was going on, experiencing Christ. But how do we rebuild that temple again so that Christ lives in us? How do we take that temple out of these four walls? And move it so others can see it? That's the question we ask during Lent. How can we make Jesus the temple, Christ the temple, be more prominent in our lives? What is it that has kept us not from walking through those doors, but from taking Christ by the hand and walking out those doors? What is it that keeps us coming to church on Sunday, but not sharing that love throughout the week? I don't have an answer. I wish I did. As we walk through Lent, it is an opportunity for us to rebuild ourselves, individually and corporately. It allows us to accept that the temple has been rebuilt, that Christ lives in and for us. We just need to figure out how to show that. How do we carry God out into the world? It's different for each and every one of us. It's different for each and every church. And it is my prayer that during this Lenten season we can begin that process of looking inwardly at ourselves, to be able to come and give a prayer of confession daily for our faults, for our flaws, for our wrongs, for our inactions, for our actions. And that daily we can come before Christ and say, God, I am so sorry for what I have done, but you are God's temple. Work through me. Take me so that I can show you to the world. So people can see you through me in my workplace, in my classroom, as I have dinner with friends, children. As I walk through the grocery store, as I get frustrated with the guy in front of me, use me, shine through me. Lord, take me as your temple. Live in me. Rebuild who I am, so that your glory may be shown. To God will be glory. Now.